Hey, what's going on, everybody? Justin here, and this video is going to be kicking off my 2024 series of my favorites or best of books on different genres and categories of books so far in the year of 2024. I used to do this a lot back in the day where I would do it halfway through the year and then obviously kind of like at the end of the year as well. Just feel like I can include more books doing it this way, and sometimes, if I don't want the list to be like 10 titles long, some of the runners up and kind of down the line a little bit don't always make it through the whole year, but I think they're still worth mentioning at this point in time. So let's just go ahead and get started. This is going to be my 2024 releases, and I've been trying to read a little bit more kind of current and recent releases, and books that are only like a year or two old, especially in the kind of like the nonfiction genres that I read and everything, rather than always just doing the backlist stuff. But that not in any particular order. I think I did the two honorable mentions and the top three by alphabetical order. So let's just go ahead and get started. So first up, as an honorable mention, we have Barron's: Money, Power, and the Corruption of America's Food Industry by Austin Farrick. And if you know anything about the industrial food complex and stuff, this is gonna make you mad if you know anything about factory like animal farming and stuff. You already know what you're kind of getting into with this. The sad thing is the animal abuse and stuff that's kind of like indirectly, kind of tangentially related to stuff in the book is like not even the worst thing in here, and that's like kind of what's just concerning, just dealing with a lot of like the human rights violations with different things. But anyways, the author takes a couple of different barons, or like super giant companies or conglomerates that sort of dominate both vertically and horizontally different aspects of the food sector, whether that's dairy milk, or in some cases like the beef form of the cattle and stuff, berries, for example, grain, all kinds of different stuff. And you just see kind of like the similarities and kind of the differences of how they dominate different things. Sometimes it's grossly just illegal stuff, and they just sort of pay the fines as sort of a cost of doing business, for example. Excuse me. Sometimes it's exploiting, migrant workers, things like that, or places where in countries where there isn't like a whole lot of like protection for workers and things like that. But yeah, it's just really concerning, kind of opens your eyes up on how, even though we can go into a supermarket and there's all these aisles and all this stuff and everything, how in a lot of sectors there's really only like a handful of companies that dominate the entire like world like distribution of it. So it's kind of really concerning when you're thinking there's 30 different beef companies right there, and it's really like maybe one or two just under like different names and stuff like that. Yeah, it was definitely an eye-opener. Like I kind of had like hints of like knowing some of the stuff, but like getting like a lot of the down-to-earth facts on like a lot of it in the stats and the numbers was just, yeah, just kind of terrifying in some ways. But the chapter opens up with Iowa hog barons, as that's the state where Austin is from. The author Austin is from, and how literally just it's directly related to just the factory farming of pigs and hogs and stuff. Like the vast majority of like the water supply for recreational use and stuff is not actually able to be used in the state of Iowa. Like it's crazy. It's like 2/3 are contaminated and stuff, and it's like directly related to the hog farming and everything. So it's just kind of crazy stuff. Lots of stats, really like kind of hard hitting stuff. If you want to get mad and you want to learn more about the food industry, I definitely think that's an important one to read for that. All right, so the second book here for an honorable mention is one I don't have a physical copy of, but it's What Do Bees Think About by Mathieu Lihoro, and this was translated from the French by Alison Duncan. And I gotta say, for being like my 10th book on bees, I think it is, and a translation no less, I just found this one really encouraging, just really fun to read. I guess maybe not encouraging is the right word. There's still a lot of gloom and doom and stuff in it towards the end, like pretty much every nature book you have to read nowadays. But it's just really fun and kind of entertaining the way Matthew writes. And I just really enjoyed like kind of learning about some different activities that the bees do. Obviously, you learn things about like the different like waggle dances and everything, but you also kind of go into more of like other actual experiments people have been doing, that he's been doing. He's really good friends apparently with Lars Chitka, who has written The Mind of a Bee, which is one I need to get to. He kind of goes over just a bunch of different like bee scientists and like kind of what they've been up to, how they've been doing experiments, and kind of what they've been learning. And the real like lens of this book is like kind of getting in the umwelt of like a bee. You know, how do they actually think? How do their brains operate? You know, how do they navigate? How do they interpret, you know, different flowers and things? How do they go back and communicate with their, you know, the rest of the hive mates and everything like that? I just really enjoyed it, and like I said, I'm at the point where like I feel like I keep reading books on bees, but sometimes I don't really feel like I've like learned a lot just because I'm reading lots of books on bees. But like I said, this one just struck me a little bit different, just hit the right notes and everything. It's very easy to read. I think this would be like the best beginner book on bees that I could recommend out of, I think, like the 9 that I've like read so far. So definitely encourage you to check out What Do Bees Think About. So now moving on to my top 3 2024 releases so far. First up is one I had to listen to an audiobook because I couldn't get it through Interlibrary alone, and it is Natural Magic, Emily Dickinson, Charles Darwin, and the Dawn of Modern Science by Renee Berglund. And this was just a fantastic kind of like dual biography / life and times of like the 1800s and like scientific thinking and stuff. Just really interesting. Emily Dickinson, interesting enough, is like one of the only poets that I like vaguely enjoy reading. I'm just not a big, I don't know, I just not good at reading poetry yet, apparently. But obviously, and then I read a lot of like stuff dealing with evolution, and Charles Darwin, like, you know, is mentioned in like half these books here at least. So like I said, it was just kind of fun, as they were pretty near contemporaries, a few years apart. Obviously one, you know, in England and one in New England. But it was really kind of interesting seeing kind of the contrast in their education, whereas Darwin, a lot of like the biological sciences and things were more for just like rich people's hobbies and stuff, whereas in New England, botany especially, but some of the other biological sciences were still not considered like, you know, studies for men and stuff, but was totally suitable for like women to learn and everything. But how like over the course of like that century, like kind of wore on, things started to switch, and the sciences became more like male dominated and everything, and it wasn't considered like appropriate for women to learn such things and everything. So it was kind of interesting how they both learned like kind of their own way of like botany and different biological sciences and everything. I just found that really interesting, and how they were both sort of oddballs, I guess you could say, for their respective communities. Obviously, you know, Darwin goes on his like 5-year voyage of the Beagle and everything. But even when he gets back, you know, he's doing a lot of his experiments just kind of like out in his like country house and everything, and having all the people ship him stuff and everything, rather than like him publishing and doing like, you know, the science and stuff with the Royal Society like all the time. And then just for example, like in New England, with Emily Dickinson, like her whole small town community, like, you know, gets rebaptized and stuff at one point, and she's like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to, and that's, you know, she kind of gets almost like vaguely ostracized. But it's also interesting, there is a couple of figures that are kind of moved between both circles. They never met each other, Dickinson and Darwin, but there are like a handful of figures that they both seem to just happen to like know and interact with on a fairly regular basis. So it was really interesting kind of seeing like the connections there. Like I said, this one's just really fun on learning kind of the different the different ways science was being taught and applied and everything, and what was appropriate and stuff over the course of the 1800s, and how, you know, the word, like even just for example the word scientist really came about during this era. But I really enjoyed it. I think if you enjoy like, you know, literature and science, either one of the two, I think you'll really enjoy. Just really fun seeing how they kind of combine with like a really unique thread to look at things. All right, so next up we have The Demon of Unrest by Erik Larson, a saga of hubris, heartbreak, and heroism at the dawn of the Civil War. And this is, like I said, I think this is like my third Civil War book in the past like 10 years. And this kept me totally engaged throughout. Erik Larson is he's pretty up there for as far as like history authors do go. I think it is merited. He uses tons of primary sources, so you get kind of the actual gist and vibe of how different like communities, how different individuals are feeling during this time period. And this book covers the initial battle of the bombardment of Fort Sumter, but that's actually the last, like, maybe sixth of the book, fifth or sixth of the book. The whole beginning is kind of the lead up to that situation with Lincoln's election and everything, all the drama around that, behind that, and the different communities, especially Charleston Harbor, I guess Charleston and its harbor. I don't know why I said Charleston Harbor. I just kind of like just the different emotions and tensions that are just, like, riling up over the course of the months and everything like that. But yeah, you see, like I said, I've said this before, I think, in my review of it. Actually, I put a link up there for if you want just me talking about just this book. Just the comedy of errors, it really was, like, when you, like, looking at, obviously, at the time, like I said, when tensions are up and you gotta make hard decisions, and it's just hard to, it's hard to do in real time, especially when communication isn't, like, super up to snuff all the time, in the mid 1800s there. Just how many mistakes were made on both sides. Just for example, I'll give, like, one from each. Like, a really bad one for the Union, when they try to send, like, kind of, something of a rescue type of thing kind of going on. There's one really, really big warship, that they wanted to use, but Lincoln and his, like, cabinet, like, literally commission it for two separate missions at the same time, and it obviously can't do it. And even when it gets caught up by, like, a faster ship saying, like, no, we're gonna remit those orders, and, like, you gotta go to Fort Sumter, he didn't believe it. Essentially, he just keeps going to Florida, and it's just like, how does that even, like, happen? Like, you just can't, like, envision that happening nowadays and everything. And then on the Confederate side, for example, when Fort Sumter is what's not the word, not barricaded, barracked, I don't know what's the word I'm thinking of. I'll put it down here. Anyways, garrison. Duh, I don't know why I couldn't think of it. As garrisoned by the Union soldiers and stuff. The Confederates are practicing their maneuvers and their artillery and everything like that. And they exit, like, they even say, we're just doing, like, practice rounds, blanks, everything like that, and they accidentally shoot an actual cannonball at the fort, before, like, declaring war or anything, like a month before and stuff. And it's just, I don't know, like, how does that actually happen? I don't know. So there is some humor in there, but you get to see a lot of really interesting characters, like Mr. Ruffin, for example. If that's the one takeaway of, like, a person you learn about, it's just some wacky Confederate personalities, I'll say there. So anyways, I really enjoyed it. I don't read a lot of American history, but this kept me engaged throughout, and it's a pretty big book. I think it's like 500 pages of text plus some notes. It's about 500 pages of text plus some notes and everything, and I was engaged throughout, so I think that's definitely a win for that. And then lastly, we have The Unclaimed: Abandonment and Hope in the City of Angels by Pamela Prickett and Stephen Timmermans. And this book, you gotta mentally prepare for. Yeah, it's really, really good. I've had a couple people comment that it's really good, but just it's just a lot, and it is a lot. And this is all about in the United States, what actually happens to people's bodies, like, after they pass, and if they have no friends or no family or anyone willing to claim the body. And you're kind of it's all about kind of navigating that system between the different local municipalities and state governments and stuff, and just kind of, like, the stress and trauma, like, that just happens behind the scenes with all this, between, like, the investigators, the coroner's office, the social workers, everything like that. There's organizations trying to kind of handle the issue in different scenarios. But I do like how at the end of the book, the authors do try to describe, like, ways to alleviate the problem, what can be done and things like that. Just for example, there are some, like, in some areas, there were people willing to claim certain bodies that they were, for example, there's a church congregation that was willing to eventually claim, like, a person who died, but the state wouldn't, like, allow that, as they were not, like, close enough, like, on kith and kin and all that stuff. So they do kind of go into different ways that we should try to address some of these problems. And it's interesting that, like, money for, like, burial service and stuff is, like, one of the lowest, I guess, reasons that people would have, people, like, don't claim bodies and stuff, whereas I thought maybe it might be higher, and kind of more, like, poverty stricken, like, areas or families and things. But there's actually a very, like, a low correlation with that. But the book itself deals with 4 individuals, kind of profiles a little bit of like a biography of their lives kind of over time, kind of leading up to the situations where, whether it was like a nursing home, just dying alone, like in their apartment, etc., etc. How did they end up in a situation where, you know, their body wasn't claimed? And obviously you can like magnify that several hundred and several thousand fold, sadly. So like I said, it's a heavy hitting book. It's a heavy topic. I do think it's important to read. It's kind of vaguely related tangentially to like kind of the work that I'm in and stuff with social work and everything. So that's kind of why I picked it up in the first place. But it's just really well written. You know, when the authors are dealing with such like a heavy topic and they do a good job being nuanced basically about everything and handling it like as gently as possible, I just really appreciated that. And I think if, you know, like, not that this is like a topic anyone's like interested in or anything like that, but if this is like an issue that maybe you've never thought about and now you're thinking about it, this might be like a good one to read. But like I said, you do have to almost, I would encourage you to like kind of mentally prepare yourself beforehand, just to be like ready to be reading about like a lot of like sorrow and death and stuff like that beforehand. So there you have it. Those are my, I guess, 5 favorites so far for the year 2024 for 2024 releases. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite 2024 release has been so far this year. I'm always on the lookout for good recommendations, and whether you're reading new recent releases or not, always remember, read victoriously.